Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing. As we're practicing again, we're going to use our number 2 pencil to, oh, that number 2 pencil is crooked. That's bent. That's weird. Using our number 2 pencil to just get the composition, the gist of what we're trying to get accomplished in here. So when you're looking at your entire page, of course, the castle is your emphasis. That's what you want to do. But you also want to leave some room for the water. You can maybe even bring it down and have almost half of that as being water. So I'm going to just come up not quite halfway through, almost halfway is about right there. So just down a little bit. I'm going to make a little line and say that's where the shore goes. And if that's the shore, then somewhere up in here is going to be my buildings. And so I can just block those in. And the cool thing about using the pencil is simple shapes. Let me see if I can get it so you can see this here. There you go. Simple shapes. So squares, rectangles, triangles, whatever it takes. So I'm just going to come in. I'm going to say, okay, here's the side of the building. Kind of comes down here. There's a tree. If you're going to block in the tree, just do it simple shapes, triangles. You know, since this is in the winter time, there's no leaves on the tree really. That's all frost. Kind of cool. Spire, another spire, another spire. There's lots of spires here. And you don't have to be too specific because we're going to get all this with our ink pen anyway. So you just get the gist of it. We'll adjust it later. The cool thing about drawing buildings is, number one, everything is man-made, so you're just looking at geometric shapes. And number two, it doesn't matter if you're off a little bit. The roof can be a little taller, a little shorter. Nobody cares. But I'll tell you what, on Friday when we draw together, we're going to do a person, a human, and that takes a little bit more proportioning, a little more effort to get everything just right. Sometimes that can be a little intimidating. And again, I just want to block things in so it's about right. I can always adjust it. All right, that's probably pretty close. Again, a lot of this stuff like the trees and the bushes and everything, we just add that. If the tree is slightly off one way or another, it's not a big deal. Just try to get it as close as we can. Not be too concerned. And the water, all the shines and stuff in there, I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to do that at the very end. And it's really simple to do. And it looks great. So I'm going to zoom into this. I just want to point out a couple of things that I'm looking at before I get started. Look at the edges over here, how they're gone. I mean, it almost blends into the background. And if you can't see it, if it's that light right there, just leave it out. So there's a lot of these little edges, little things that we're just going to leave out. Even these edges up here in the towers, on the roof line, a lot of that we're going to just leave out. But because we have to tell everybody where it is, sometimes a couple of dots. Okay, so just in the back of your mind, keep thinking, okay, I got to leave it out. When in doubt, leave it out. Got lots of stuff to leave out. So I'm going to zoom into this, and I'm just going to start left to right. I'm going to start with this little tower off on the left here. Because it's fairly simply done, I'm just going to take my pen and look at the darkest areas, put in the darkest areas, and leave out everything else. I'm just going to start with this little triangular shape. I'm just going to little dots and dashes, and there's that little triangular shape. I don't know what that is, but it's something. And here's a little ledge along there, little dots and dashes. And this little edge that comes down here, I may want to do just a little dot or a little dash along the side and then leave it out until I get down to the bottom. And I might put something in down there. But then there's a tree that's back in there that kind of tells us where that edge is. And so I might want to use that tree, maybe even start out here and do, there's a little limb and there's some little branches up in here. Maybe just a couple little dots and dashes along in there, and that'll define the edge of that building right there. And the rest of it, you just leave out. Just let it go. And I'll come back in later on and do a little bit more of this in there, but just little dots and dashes. And you just got to do enough to tell your viewer there's a tree back there or a little bush or something. The rest of that, it's gone. There is a little window up at the top. And let me show you an easy way to do windows. Wherever your light source is, so our light source is coming from this direction, which means the edge on the right side is going to be lighter, and on the left side we're going to have a shadow. And so here's that shadow. It just is this kind of a little angle, a little upside down L. And you can put a little, like a little dot or something, one there, one there, one there. And that's your window. That's it. That's all you need. So I just do two little lines to show where my L is, a couple little dots, and that's the window. If there's glass in the window, like this one, that shine is going to hit that glass and it's going to be light. If there's no glass and it's empty, we might have to do a little shading in there. But otherwise, that's it. On this other side, so on the very top are these little crenellated pieces. And rather than draw those little crenellated pieces, I'm just going to do a little shadow. One right there. And then I'm skip over and do another one right there. Another one right there. So now there's little crenellations there. 1, 2, 3. That's all I get. And on this side, I'm going to do the same thing. Come down here. There's one there. There's one there. And there's one about right in there. Now, you think to yourself, oh, they look like they're just little pieces hanging out there. Well, maybe we need a little dot. Maybe a little dot on the corner right there, maybe one right there. On the top part here, I don't think I'm going to do a little dot. I think I'm just going to leave it out. Because where it gets into the shadow, you'll be able to see some of that. So if I just do something like that, and if I got rid of my graphite, since the graphite is kind of getting in the way, but you get rid of the graphite and your eye makes that connection. Okay, don't be afraid to leave it out. And if you think to yourself, oh, Mr. Lowe, that's too much gap there, put a little dot in the middle of it. And everybody knows that that's where that's at. Now, this little edge that's right there, again, instead of drawing a line, you can put little dots and dashes there just to tell where that is. But then right down here, there's a vine or something that's climbing up that wall right there. So maybe we want to do some little dashes and dots and just say, hey, there's that vine. It's right there. It's climbing up there. And I can't see all of it, so why draw it? Just when in doubt, leave it out. I can't see it. I'm not going to draw it. There's some more that's down in there. Maybe some more over here. Little dots and dashes. And they're just like little scribbles. Scribble, 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 scribble. And the more you scribble, the darker it gets. So you got to look at it and say, well, how dark is it? And you try and match the values with how much dot and dash you put in there. Comes up the wall over here. Sometimes just a little dot is all you need. Sometimes I look at it and I have no idea what's going on in there. But I can see the darks and lights, so I just try to replicate those darks and lights. Whatever's there, it'll come through. So if you think to yourself, well, that's a little doorway or it's a little ledge or something, I don't know. You just leave it, you just let it go. That is brick, though, and if you want it to kind of look like brick, rather than hatch through it one way, I mean, it's fairly light, I'm just going to go kind of towards the edge of the building with parallel line. And notice I'm barely touching this. And so I'm going to let it skip across there. Sometimes I just use little dots and dashes, just back and forth. And that's going to create enough shadow there, and it's going to look like brick. Once you draw a line, you're subject to that line. And so try to avoid as many edges as you can. Because if you need to change that or do something different with it, you definitely can. Very light, very thin. And little dots and dashes. There you go. That's it. That's it. That tower's pretty well done. This side there is some shadow over there, so I'm gonna just do little dots and dashes up here, just a little bit. And then I'm going to do that same thing, continuing up. Little dots and dashes. Here's the little crenellations up there. One. And that's kind of my technique. I'm just going to keep going and just putting in the shadows of things that I see. Here's a little spire coming up there. It's just a little zigzaggy line. It's got a little circle on top. There's a tree branch that kind of comes over here, and there's a decoration of some sort on the roof. I'm not sure I want to put that in there. So I'm going to go just real quick with some edge, some line here. Just really quick. Leave that side open in case I need to put a limb or something in the tree. And then if I want to do some decoration, I just come in here and do some little dots and dashes just to give the illusion that there's a decoration on the top. Have no idea what it is. And a little spire on top of that. I'm ready for this tree. And again, I'm going to just do some little dots and dashes to try to get that tree in there. But you're trying to follow the texture, you know, what that tree kind of looks like. But remember, leave a lot out. So I'm just going to come over and say, well, there's a little limb right there. And you skip up a little bit, there's a little limb hanging out up here, and I'm just barely touching the surface and allowing my brush or my pen to just kind of brush along. Some of it's a little darker, some of it's a little lighter. And so those little limbs can be just hanging out up there. They're not attached to anything. But you'll get the idea. Again, it's all about communicating to your viewer what that thing is. So just a couple little dots and dashes. And there's your tree. Again, these little dots and dashes are just hanging out. Don't have to attach them. Sometimes I do little scribblies. Sometimes they're little M's or U's. You know, depending on the tree, depending on the feel of what I'm trying to get. If this were a pine tree, it might be a little different. And it might be a pine tree. I don't know. I can't tell with the snow and the texture. But that's okay. I'm going to use the roof line here as I go in. I'm just going to do little dots and dashes. Same thing on this lower side. Just going to pretend that I can see through the tree. I'm going to leave out the tree, at least part of it. A little triangle shape up there at the top, that's where the little tower is. Just going to zigzag through that, put some little shapes up there. This side's a little darker, so I'm going to just do a little bit more there. Try to leave out that space for that other little tower. They're just triangles. Little zigzags. And a little spindle on top there. No idea what's on there. Here's another one on the other side. It's round. I don't see another edge there, so I'm just going to do this little triangle shape as I go up. Zigzag through that. Leave out that edge because it's very dark. And again, on some of those spindles, they get kind of thin. They almost look like they're just floating up there. So go ahead and make them floating. Little window. Just a little rectangle of darkness, and you got it. Tree's a little darker on the right side there. I'm going to add a little bit more dots and dashes to that side. Like I say, you can always come back in and add more. You need to. Whenever you're doing these little support, there's little arches that kind of come around, support the towers as they They're a little wider on the top than they are on the bottom. All I do is just do a little arch. So there's one there, one there, one there, one there. Probably not enough. And then you just little triangles of shading in there. And whenever you want little brick, it's just back and forth, little meandering. Let your pen just barely skip, and then do some little dots anywhere you think you need them. Once you figure out your technique and kind of how to use your pen, it goes very quick. And you do kind of want to sometimes push yourself a little bit. Anytime you have an arched window, like this little one that's in this little part of the tower, it's the same concept. But instead of a 7, you're doing just the little arch. Kind of comes down. Little dot there. Little dot on the other side. Hatch through it, and there's your arched window. Same kind of thing. Whenever I know something is going to be pretty dark, I'll hatch through it one way, then I can come back into it and go the other ways. Because I know it's pretty dark. So it's not gonna hurt it to be hatched through there. And then I can kind of establish my values there. Now you pretty much know each technique. The brick are just little hatched lines with little dots and dashes. Depending on the brick, this brick that's down here is a little thicker than this stuff up here. This brick is probably more linear, and this is probably rock down here. And so when you're doing rock, you can kind of go back and forth like this with little, these are called meandering lines. I'm barely touching the surface, but you want to get some little round ones, and they're all got to be a little different, where brick is kind of all the same. So this up in here could be brick, or this down here looks more rock. And just kind of keep it very light. And again, if you think to yourself, oh, it's really dark, put more line in there, or if it's really light, leave it out. One thing I do want to do, and I know that we're not quite to that point yet, but when you get down to the water is very linear, very horizontal. And so what you do is you just kind of look at our scrap. Let me back off of this for a minute. You can see the reflection of the object. And so I can look down here and say, well, I know it's really dark, and down here in the water, if this is where the water goes, I'm just going to do very linear back and forth little lines like this in the darkest areas. And it'll end up looking like water. Just keep it very level. You can't drop it down. So you just got to go back and forth. And the closer you get to you, the more you can kind of space those little lines out a little bit. You can always go back into it too. So I'm just going to go back and forth, very linear. Some are short, some are longer. Just back and forth. It's the easiest water you've ever drawn. Like I said, if you can't see it, don't draw it in. There's lots of edges there that I cannot see. There's a little spiral on the here on the right side. It's really light. So I just put a couple little dots and dashes up there, and they're not even attached to anything. They're just hanging out there. The front edge is just a little line, and I think you got it. There's a little balcony, like with a little rose window or something on this front facing side. I think just a few little dots and dashes will do it. There's the top, the arch. And then I'm just going to draw some little shapes of darkness in there. I have no idea what's going on there. I got to get rid of this graphite. It's just bugging me. Graphite's only there as a guide anyway. When you're ready to do the little bushes on the bottom, they're kind of done the same way, just little dots and dashes. And I like to use little M's because that kind of makes your bushes feel a little fluffier. Little M's with little dots and dashes in between. It's all about darks and lights. This is why we start value right from the start, is because I think most of what you're going to do, whether it's using values to create forms or values to create textures, it's so important. Value is one of the most important of the art elements. Just enhances most of the other principles and elements. When we get into color, you'll see that too. You can always do more. You can always go back into it. Try to get as much information as you can right from the start. Especially when we start doing live models, they move on you. So you want to get as much information there as you can so that when they do move, you can always go back into it from memory. Great place for a signature would be right off onto the right where the light is in the water. Or I suppose you could go off onto the left there, and maybe even up there by where the shoreline is. That'd be a good place for a signature. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you had a good time doing this. Hope you learned something. That's what it's all about. Had a good experience. And I hope you have a lovely day.